You don't have to go in search of a purpose. You know how sometimes I think that our purpose changes.
The Girlfriends started as a creative outlet. It wasn't anything where I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna do this my full-time job. I am going to do Girlfriends.
Going into this big thing that we have so many members and it's there's so many events, and it's just, I'm sure that when you started it at the beginning, you didn't really
True experience of how I struggled to make friends in the city. So I moved from Venezuela back in 2014.
Today, we're going to be talking about Girlfriends Boston, but most importantly, the importance of building a community around us. So I wanted to start by letting our listeners and viewers know more about you and how you formed Girlfriends Boston. So for those that don't know you, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Ana Baptista. I own and run Girlfriends Boston, which is a community for women in Boston. We're looking to make friends. Basically, we do events and activities in and around the city where we promote connections and genuine friendships for those who might not, have, space to do in the workplace or anywhere else. Girlfriends is a community that you can come and enjoy and have fun and do activities. And obviously, we're not only an event platform, an event space, but also the idea for people to join and actually make connections themselves and do their own activities on their own.
Wonderful. And it was created in 2018, right?
Correct. Girlfriend started back in 2018 as the idea of putting beautiful events together for women in any industry in the city.
And what was the inspiration behind it?
So it's a true experience of how I struggled to make friends in the city. So I moved from Venezuela back in 2014, did English school, and then I did college. And I went to a non-traditional school, which meant I was working full-time and then studying full-time. And everybody was different ages, different, walk of life. So it wasn't much so their interaction of quote unquote normal college. It was just people trying to, get the work done and leave. So connections and friendships wasn't something that I could cultivate, even though I did a few. Then after I left college and I struggled a little bit with how do you make friends in the city? It's just not something that I personally cannot approach anyone and be like, what I could, but people are not receptive to it. And be like, hey, do you want to be my friend? It wasn't something like that. And also on the side during, school and all of that, I was a photographer, and then I worked. And I was a photographer just to create, something fun and not so much day-to-day work. And I went to beautiful events that were put together for the influencers and blogger community. And I thought that was a little bit unfair that I couldn't bring anyone else who was outside of that community, because you had to have a following or you had to be a part of that. So Girlfriends came to life as the idea of anyone could join a beautiful event regardless of the industry.
And as we know, now it has kind of just blown into this big thing that we have so many members, and it's there's so many events, and it's just, I'm sure that when you started it at the beginning, you didn't really, I'm thinking you may not have known what was going to happen with Girlfriends Boston in the future and what will still happen in the future, because I think a lot is to come. And saying that, something I wanted to talk about was, I know that you manage Girlfriends Boston mainly full-time now, right?
Yes.
I have an idea, because we have talked about it, of how that happened, but I kind of wanted to share it on this episode as well, because I think it's an interesting story.
Yeah, so Girlfriends started as a creative outlet. It wasn't anything where I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna do this my full-time job. I am going to do Girlfriends and events full-time. That's not something I quote unquote study for, or was a very shy person, if you could believe it, because I'm very extrovert at events. However, I was very shy before I started doing Girlfriends, and it was not a thought of a full-time job ever. However, I did like the creativity, and I did like putting events together, and I did like creating community, and I thought it was needed, and I needed it personally. So I was working full time back in 2019, at the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020. I was like, let's make this a full time. Not a full time thing. Let's make this an official business And Girlfriends was created as a platform for, marketing. It wasn't like an event planning thing. And I thought it was going to thrive as a hobby on the side while I still have my full-time job. And then 2020 started. We did that. I did that. And March of 2020 came about, and we know what happened. I don't have to explain it. And that everything went, quote unquote, out the door, because whatever we knew as cultivating relationships in real life wasn't a thing anymore. But I took the approach of Girlfriends and made it, hey, how do we connect our community, which was growing online, to the businesses who are physical, who might be struggling back in the pandemic, and bring awareness to them. So Girlfriends Boston Recommends started as a funny idea of doing, TikTok, showcasing businesses around the city. And that blew up. Obviously, the need for community in real life was needed. So I hold on to not doing an event in real, life, just because of obviously the pandemic until 2021. And then at the end of 2020, I got laid off. So it was just, obviously, it was the part of the pandemic where we didn't know what was happening. And people were like, oh, did you take the opportunity and went for it? I was like, no, I was scared. I don't think if I was not laid off, I would have ever pursued Girlfriends full time, just because that wasn't my approach with it. But I was like, you know what? There is nothing else I could lose. I'm gonna try it for a couple of months, and if it works, then great. If it doesn't, then I'm just gonna go back and apply for jobs. And it's been what, 2 years since that happened, and I have not yet applied for a single job. So
Doesn't this remind you of like how life sometimes happens for us and not to us?
exactly.
But we not kind of see it in the very moment. But if we keep on going, we'll see it eventually. Because like, I'm sure when the layoff happened, you didn't think it was a good thing. Like you weren't happy about it.
I took, I would say, a week to cry. I've never been laid off for a job. I've never been in the situation where I was like, oh my God, I have no money literally to pay rent. Just because I didn't foresee this happening. And it was just like, from that week of what is happening, my life is literally in shambles. I need to figure it out. It was just like when something crazy happens to you and you're just like, we're gonna fix this somehow. I don't know how, but we're going to do it. That's exactly what happened. And basically I got to work. What people would say, I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna make it happen. And if you asked me back in 2021, did I think Girlfriends was gonna be at the stage that is now? Absolutely not. But I do know that Girlfriends has a lot of potential, and not only because of the work that is put behind it, but the people that join Girlfriends. So I do think that's an important aspect. Girlfriends is good. We make amazing events, but it wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for people like you who attend it, and not only attend it, but are a part of our community outside of events. So people who truly want to make friends and truly are like, I am here because I want to meet new people. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. And, something else that I think about right now is I like to say that you don't have to go in search of a purpose. You know how sometimes I think that our purpose changes as time goes. I don't even think it's one purpose for a whole lifetime. But I like to believe that our purpose calls us when the time is right. And we just have to be ready to answer that call. And that's what they say, like, preparation meets opportunity. And when that happens, I think magic happens. In this case, Girlfriends happen. So
I've never heard that, and I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, I that's really what I think. Listening to people's stories. I love listening to people's stories. Like I love to read books. I love to read memoirs, and I just love to listen to people, but not just listen for listening's sake. I mean, actually listening, because you learn so much. You have your own experiences, your own life, but like everybody else is also living life. And if you pay attention, there's so much to gain. So like knowing you and meeting you, one of the things that came to my mind, I don't know if you know this, but the first time we met was just like, wow. And like you were courageous enough to do something that you really didn't know what the outcome would be. But you did it. Yeah. And you were courageous enough to believe in yourself. A lot of people suffer from imposter syndrome. And I mean, I've suffered from it too. And it's not a bad thing. It's just a thing that happens to humans, where sometimes we become our worst enemies and tell ourselves that we are not good enough for something, or we're not gonna make it. Being able to like conquer that and be like, regardless of whatever I'm feeling right now, I'm gonna better myself anyway. I think that's a very important message, or just a very important thing. And meeting you and having that conversation the first time we met was one of the, what I say, was part of the encouragement I needed to start my own podcast at the time. Because I was still trying to like figure it out. I was still thinking, I was like, but then I'm like, I mean, if Anna can do this, come on, I should try.
And honestly, people know this. We just mentioned it. I had no background whatsoever. My only background was like, hi, I just want to make friends. And exactly to your point, like if you have a drive for something, not doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna be easy. Oh, God knows I struggle uh with obviously a business. And yes, you get to a different stage on a business or a project or just life in general, and you're like, oh, I figured that one out. I'm like good for for this time. And then like a new challenge or raise, and you're like, and how do I deal with this now? So knowing that is, I think, what personally keeps me thriving. And every time I see someone who's, obviously I've come across many people, which I'm very lucky for, but I see them and they're like, oh, I have this idea. I'm like, what are you waiting for? Like, if you don't start it, someone else will. And then you're going to be like, oh, I wish I did that. Like, I knew I was going to be good at that, but you never started it. And I'm not saying at the beginning it's going to be perfect, or maybe it will, but like just for you, like the courage of you to do that and start a podcast and be like, hi, I want to share this with the world. Or for anyone who's starting anything, I think that the only thing that's stopping you is you, and the only thing that's stopping you from doing that is just taking the first step, whatever that is, like listening to more podcasts, or seeing how other people are doing things, or studying, or just simply just being with your thoughts and being like, you know what, I want to do this and I'm gonna figure it out. And from my personal experience, again, if this helps anyone, it just means, honestly, if I could do it with literally no background whatsoever, or knowing of how creating a community was, or how important or impactful that was going to be in my life, anyone could do it. And now that's my reward of like, I've made girlfriends, and I've never wanted girlfriends to be a place where like, oh, I'm gonna be, I'm gonna make this so much money, whatever. It was, for me, it's never been about the money. It's been like, oh my God, I met that person. That person's wonderful. And, or, hey, these two people met and now they're friends and they're hanging out and they're traveling. That has happened. So that is the rewarding part of my end, where you see it come to life and you see something that you created is impacting people in other, aspects of their lives. So I think it's fun.
Absolutely. I actually have a question. And I don't know if you know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why is it harder to make friends as adults? I feel like it's so much easier when you are in like elementary school, high school. I don't know, we become adults and then all of a sudden it's so hard to make friends.
So if you asked me this a month ago, I would not have known the answer. I could have guessed it before, but now I think, and I was actually the people who answer this question. I was like, that is absolutely true. So, when the whole thread thing started and like this new platform started, one of the thread questions I asked was, why is it hard to make friends as an adult? Because I didn't know. Like, I created this whole community and I just found the struggle. I didn't really know why it was hard. And someone gave me a really good answer, which was, when we're in high school or in school or, working in person or X, Y, and Z, you're put in an environment where you're quote unquote forced to be there. So when you're a child, you're forced to be, you're forced to go to school. In a way, we're encouraged you to go to school, but like you're put in that position where you have to spend a lot of time with people. You have to spend time with people doing activities. So there's where you find like, oh, if I like sports, then someone else who is doing this sports also likes sports, you would think. So you're attached to life in a way where you're sharing experiences and you're sharing life, and you're also forced to be there. When you're an adult, that factor of you having to be there is not there anymore. You have a life, you moved away. Yes, you might have a job. That might just mean that you have a job for the necessity of having a job. Doesn't necessarily mean you want to be there sometimes. Sometimes you might want to be there. And that forces people to separate in the way of you don't have to be there. So friendships don't come as easily as adults. So I think that's the quote unquote long, short answer to that. Like, we're not forced to be in the same place. And when the pandemic happened, we were literally in a space where we couldn't see each other physically. So I'm hoping that betters now, but in general, it's just different because we have different lifestyles and we have different likings, and people do change. Like, people think, oh, I'm the same person that I was in school, and that is absolutely not true. I am not the same person that I was in high school. I'm not the same person that I was in college, and I hope I'm not the same person that I'm now in the future.
I always say that too.
I hope, like, I hope
you're a pretty good person though.
Yeah, I hope that for the better. I'm not hoping like I'll become like a worse person, but and I do hope that in the future, if I'm someone else, the same idea, but like I'm someone different, that if I have different things that I like, then that I get to meet people who are in the same headspace then. But I do hope that girlfriends at least is a drive for that. If you're in a new, in a new stage of your life, then the girlfriends is the platform where you are able to meet people and share experiences, or in the same stage of your life back then, or now, for that instance.
Yeah, and like picking back on what you mentioned about like growth. I mean, even myself, I wouldn't say that I'm the same person I was in high school. At the core, maybe, but not
Exactly.
because you grow, you learn things, you change. And I definitely say I already know for a fact that 10 years from now, I'm gonna be a different person. It's just
Exactly.
like you said, for the better, not for the worse. That's the plan, and that's the hope. We don't want to like go back. We're gonna move forward and just keep on learning positive things and becoming better versions of ourselves.
Yep.
So just to speak more on that. But yeah, I think having a support system is very important. Having a community is very important. Personally, when I moved here to the Boston area, I didn't know a whole lot of people. I mean, I knew my family members that were here, but I didn't know anyone else. And it was tough because like I was used to having a community. I feel like it maybe happened by chance, but I was able to build, a friend group, but not a friend group like you think of like high school mean girls. No, just like people with like-minded people who are all trying to just be their best selves and win in this life and be connected on things we had in common and things we were trying to achieve. And I honestly feel like we became a family, even though we were not related by blood. So that taught me the importance of that, because I can't even count the times that I would almost give up on something and someone from my friend group would be like, no, Sherilyn, you have to keep on going. Or the times that I would feel so sad because of something that happened and that I probably generally wouldn't share with anyone, but maybe I share with someone in my friend group. And something about what they tell me to that just changes my perspective to it. And then there you have it. My day is good again, and I'm able to keep on moving. I cannot even begin to list out the importance of having that community. And that's not to say that in any way that replaces your family or anything of that sort. Your family is your family, but you can also have a chosen family. And that is a group of people that become part of your community. And so when I heard about Girlfriends Boston and I joined, I wanted to meet people that I could relate to, that I could just, build a community with. And as well, another thing that I also wanted to say is, as adults, it's very easy to get lost in the grind because we work. We have to. It's not like when you're in school where you're not worrying about bills or any of that. Now you have to pay your bills. You have to pay so many things. It's just money. So, so you have to work really hard, and it's so easy to forget about having a life outside that. If you let it happen, it will most likely happen. So if you want to have a life outside work, you have to be very intentional about it. But I will also say that if you are able to do that, it makes you even better at what you do. And it kind of, in my opinion, makes your life, more complete, because every element has a role that it plays. So socializing and having fun activities that you enjoy with people that you enjoy being with has its own role. Netflix and chilling, if you're that kind of person, plays its own role. And just so many different things. And so, one of the things I felt was very beautiful about Girlfriends Boston, which prompted me to join was this very fact. What do you think about like the importance of having a support system? What do you think about that?
So I'm gonna say two things before I answer that question, and I do think it comes, in relationship with that. Is one of them, when you go to anything where you're trying to meet people, my one advice is that you have to be open for it. If you're not open to anything and everything, you never know what you're going to experience. I'm not saying go do crazy things. Well, if that's what you want, you can go have fun with that. But you have to be open that people might be different than who you are, and that is okay. You have to be open that, people have different life experiences than yours, and that is completely fine. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be friends or that you're not going to have similar relationships and have a common ground and become friends, but you also have to be open to be vulnerable in a way. And I think that comes, yes, with time, but also with you wanting that. I always say you can, and this goes for my personal experience, you cannot go to something expecting, yes, I want friends, however, I'm not going to talk to anyone, or I'm not going to ask any questions, or I'm not going to be opening to listening as well. So that is one point. And then to that same idea, you're not going to be friends with everybody in it, that you meet. And I do the comparison, which is interesting, where you wouldn't date everybody. So why would you be friends with everybody? And I'm not saying that you go to an event or you go to an activity or you're in a coffee shop and you're going to be mean with everybody or, nice to everybody. Yes, you can be respectful and polite. Maybe you wouldn't choose to hang out with that person outside of it. You would just be with that person there. But if you meet anyone at that event or if you meet anyone in that space, then my hope is that you pursue that, like exactly how you pursue a relationship or exactly how you pursue like a romantic relationship or a friendship relationship. It's the same thing. So be open, one is an advice, and then be willing to pursue the friendships and the things that you want. Because again, going back to your point of adults and life, it gets really busy. If we do not plan for that, things will not happen because we're not forced to be in the same environment as we were before. So the pursuing needs to, be more. And I'm not saying a friendship needs to be work, but if you want to know about, if you want someone to ask you how you are, then you also have to ask how they are. It's like that relationship building. And to answer your question in terms of a support system. So Girlfriends also started as the idea that I do not have family in this country. My only family is my mom, and here I'm Venezuelan, and my mom is in Florida. So if I needed anyone to take me to the hospital, if anything, God forbid, happened, or to, if I want to cry it out and I just want to rant about something, then my family, who you would think will be that for me, is not here personally, physically. Yes, I do count on my family 100% over the phone, but sometimes you do want someone to hold your hand and be like, you know what, maybe it's not great right now, but it will be fine. And so having a support system in that scenario is incredibly important and someone that you can feel comfortable with. But comfort does come with time and comfort does come with openness. So
Beautifully said. You mentioned creativity, and I like that because I like to say that I'm a creative person too. But something I've noticed about creativity is people's creative outlets are different. Like, for example, you are able to put together events, and like you said, it's not like you learned it anywhere. It's just kind of that's where your creativity directs you to. Like, you're able to put together events. You're into photography as well, and it's I don't know. Like, I would say that I'm a creative person. I don't know if I'll be very good at putting together events. Like, I don't know. I haven't tried it, but I feel like what I've noticed with creativity is different people can be creative in different ways. Like it's not usually one way. Just because you can have a group of people that are all creatives doesn't mean they can all do well at creating the same thing. So my question to you is like, how do you kind of like discover your creative place? And why I'm asking that is because I actually asked myself that for a long time. And I'll tell you how I got to my answer, but I wanted to hear from you. I felt like long ago, listen, I'm a creative person. There's something about the way my mind works that I feel that that's something that I can do, but I don't know where it should go. Like, I don't know where my creative space is. And so I figured it out, and I'll mention how, but I wanted to ask you.
Well, I want to know the answer to that as well. Because first of all, I think you asking that question just really opens up a lot of questions for me as well, where I do know that I'm a creative person. I grew up in a family that at least my parents didn't have a traditional 9 to 5. So I grew up in the environment of entrepreneurship in a way, which I didn't think about it that way. For me, it was just like flexibility in time and traveling. And obviously as a kid, you don't see the struggles, but struggles as well. And I feel like being restricted was a no for me, and I didn't know I was restricted. I didn't know having a boss in the sense of like someone above you, and you taking decisions into that was going to affect my professional life in any way. I loved my boss when I had them, but it was just like limiting for me. And I do think that from the time I started working and was in the workforce, I was just like, I do want the flexibility. I do want to be able to decide what I want to do with my time, which I think is very important. So that is where I like started exploring my creativity, where I am a very visual person. So, and I'm like answering all of these questions in my head right now as you asked that, because people are like, how do you put events together? I just like beautiful things. Like, I just like to create beautifully, curated events that I'm like, yes, absolutely. That looks like from the eye, it looks very beautiful to me. And I hope that obviously looks beautiful to other people. So I explode that. I'm very good at storytelling. Therefore, I do photography and I tell stories. Doesn't necessarily mean anything to maybe other people, but to me, like capturing an image that tells way more than if someone were to tell it to me, then is beautiful. And the same thing applies to events, and the same thing applies to creating community. If you're able to showcase that, and I think my strong suit will be like behind like creating events, behind photography, behind all of that, it will be the way that you tell a story, the way that people experience that story, the way that people analyze that story, which might not be the same for everybody, but it's just that. So I would say that's the way that I express my creativity. Did I come to that from a very analytic point? Absolutely not. I think I just came with that right now of like how I explore and continue to explore my creativity in a way. So I would love to hear your answer, because I just came up with how I did that, which is absolutely true, but I've never thought about it in any shape or form. It was just very natural to me.
I like your answer, and I like the fact that it was spontaneous, because it was, you kind of, it put you in a position where you had to really like think back and be like, hold on, how did I act? So yeah. So I'll tell you. So I think for me, when I was a teenager, right, I didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to like explore my creative side. I was more of like, the kind of school that I went to and everything was kind of more. It was more about what I said, the technical side of studying and things like that. There wasn't a whole lot of space for creativity. The only space there, maybe I would say, would be literature, and that is like writing and reading and things like that, and analyzing. But if I look back, even then, my strongest hold in literature was connecting with characters. Not to say that I couldn't write or that I couldn't like do other things, but that was the strongest part of literature for me. And it came very natural. Nobody taught me how to do that. I could read a story and tell you what I felt the character was feeling, and just almost, I don't even know if that was the initial intent of the writer when they wrote it, but I would almost create a story out of a story.
I love it.
Connecting with the characters. And that's me thinking back though. I don't know that I thought it was a thing back then. So after that, like you can imagine, like after high school, I went to college. I studied law. I studied project management. When I mean studying law, I mean I got my first degree in law, got my law school degree, and then I went back for a master's in project management. None of these things have anything to do with like creativity. It's just so for the longest time, I wasn't doing anything in the creative space. I wasn't using that side of me at all. I was using, a different side, which
The technical side of life, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but what I realized though is when I would like, again, watch movies, I would do the same thing that I was doing with the characters in the books that I was reading in literature. I could again, analyze it in this way, almost in a critical way sometimes. So I will tell you, well, this character isn't developed well because they are not expressing what I feel like this character should have, like things like that. I didn't really think it was a thing, right? But it's again, always came natural, where it's almost like I could create a story out of a story, or I could tell you what I think should be done better or something like that. And then even when I would like have conversations with people, I always enjoyed connecting. I enjoyed having conversations that tapped into the essence of who we are as against superficial conversations. And for whatever reason, whenever I would approach people with that, a lot of the times I got that. Like I was able to get that. And that's even if I meet you for the first time. And it takes me back to a story that just came to my mind right now, where when I was in high school, right, there was someone I knew, like a friend of mine at the time, who wanted to write a love letter to her ex-boyfriend. And then me, with my connecting skills and storytelling skills, I'm like, I kind of just got all her feelings that she felt and put them in this letter. And she gave it to the guy, presented it to be like she wrote the letter, even though the feelings were hers, but it's just the way that I was able to connect it and put it, I mean, they got back together. But bottom line is, yeah.
I love it. That's such a beautiful story.
But like even that, I didn't even know it was a thing. So it's like at the end of the day, I was doing that in different ways. So I was doing that with talking to people. I was doing that when I would, analyze like movies, or even when I read books. Oh my goodness, that's even like I can go in a whole different world talking about a book and the characters and things like that. And I realized that I love to connect with people through storytelling. It's really what it is. I didn't have a word for it. I didn't have a way to describe it, but I was doing it. So when I got to the realization of that, I think it was just after so many times where people would say, oh, Charlene, this thing you're doing is actually a thing. Like you may think it's normal, but a lot of people cannot do it. Like I heard that like so many times, and that got me thinking. And I'm like, if I think back, I think I've been doing this my whole life. I just again, no one taught me.
It's so funny because I relate to that. People and girlfriends and my friend group in general, my family and many people that I know, they're like, how are you so good at creating content?
Mhm.
And first of all, I do have a big imposter syndrome in that scenario of my life. I think it can always be better, which is not a bad thing to do. But I do think that your creativity has an impact. People tend to think like, oh, being creative is just like a distraction to, your regular side of life or work or whatever. Your creativity can make you have an impact in life, have an impact in other people's life. And creativity is not being creative doesn't mean you're lacking anything. It just means that's where you're strong at. The fact that you literally made with your words have a relationship come back to life is huge. And that should be celebrated because that's the way that you're strong at. And I think that's not only beautiful, but that's something that you should, and you're doing it with this podcast, is like you're pursuing that. You're pursuing the idea of with words you can impact people, with words you can enhance feelings. And I do think that people do that, enhancing feelings, through different creative outlets and different creative ways. By you, it might be writing. By you, it might be storytelling in the sense of like actually speaking and reading and talking about it. For me, it might be like visually, and just showcasing a story and bringing feelings out through something visual. And I think the world is so big and there's so many people who are able to relate to the way that you do creativity and that you are creative. And it just means that you're bringing those feelings in any way, shape, or form. It might be like you see something and I cry. I cry every time I open TikTok. Like I scroll through something and I cry from the way that like they tell stories or there's something in it, and that's how my feelings that get brought out. For you, it might be like writing something and that someone else is gonna relate to that, or telling this podcast where people are like, actually what you said makes a lot of sense for a person, and it can be impactful in their life. So I not only encourage you to continue this podcast because I think you have a lot of beautiful things to say, but also that you look at it from the perspective of it is important what you're doing. It doesn't necessarily mean it's technical. But you can make creativity your, your passion, your life, your job, your whatever it is that you want to do, because it's equally as important as having a degree in engineering or a degree in whatever it is. Like, is equally as important to explore that side of you.
I think that creativity can change the world. And so I think if we look at history and most of the, what you call them, revolutionists, people that really made that kind of impact, I think they were all creatives.
They were all creative because they saw life in a different way that people didn't see it at the time. Or maybe they did, they just didn't pursue it. And that's the difference between someone who takes a leap of faith into doing something, or a leap of, faith on themselves to do something, and just say, hey, it's me. I'm here to do it. You might not understand it at the beginning, but you could do it. There's always the whole like, oh, people didn't believe in me and that's why I'm successful. That thing has an impact. My family was very supportive. My circle was very supportive of myself. However, I did have a person who was very important to me, and a person just say at the beginning of when I was, pursuing girlfriends full time, that's just a hobby. Why don't you just like look for a job? And I'm like, this is a job. And the fact that you're not seeing it as, it just means that I have to prove it, not only to you, but to myself, that this is a job and this can work. So I always say that that person had an impact in my life, because they told me they did not believe in what girlfriends was, and here I am showing them what it is and what it could be.
Don't we all have that one person though?
Exactly.
Sometimes
We
more.
always do.
But then what really makes a difference is like, what do you believe,
Yep.
right? You can have people doubt you, but if you don't believe in yourself, that's the big problem. And believing in yourself doesn't mean that you won't be scared.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that you won't have imposter syndrome. It doesn't mean that there are times where you literally have anxiety at the thought of pursuing that. It doesn't mean that that won't happen. But I just, like you mentioned, like, I think the biggest difference between people that make things happen and those that don't is that they tried.
Yep. There's this, all of my sources in life are TikTok. Interesting. There's this audio that says something along the lines of like, do the cringe things. Like, you have 3 likes in a post, so what? Those are 3 people. Just do it, because you're not doing it for other people, you're doing it for yourself. And by showing up for yourself, then you're showing the world who you are. And if they like it, then great. If they don't, then you are going to find people who would like that. So I do think that you should pursue anything that you want in life, and maybe not be, it might not be. Before I started girlfriends, I did 300 other things that didn't work at the time, but then I got to the one thing that worked. But you have to experiment and try different activities and different things, different passions of yourself, and see which one is stick, and see which one you feel more comfortable with.
And most of the things that didn't worked out in the end, because they led you to this point, right? So they kind of did work out, they just didn't know. It goes back to what I was saying. Even when you try and fail and you think exactly what I thought, like, I knew this wouldn't work out. I knew this. Well, keep on moving. You really don't know what's ahead. So
yeah, I do have an interesting story in that scenario. The first thing creatively I would say that I started was a Instagram account for food. So it was like a food blog, which didn't go anywhere at the time. And if we bring it back to now, a lot of the recommendations are do our own food. So you're like, I always think about that. Like, it didn't work then, but it works now, because it needed to be something more than just food. It needed to be more of like a connection and like a community, and recommendations for people who maybe didn't know where to go, what to do, or X, Y, and Z. But I always bring it back to like, see, the food blog thing, it is a thing now in a way. It's just differently shaped.
Exactly. Wow. For those that would like to join Girlfriends Boston and don't know how can they join?
So if you want to join the membership, then ideally, first of all, you should follow Girlfriends. Everywhere is Girlfriends Boston, at Girlfriends Boston. So anywhere, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. And if you want to join the membership, if I think you're ready to explore and meet new people and be open to different people and different experiences and activities, you can check out their website, which is girlfriendsboston.com. Under the tab of membership, you can join $17 a month, and that gets you all of the perks that are listed on the website, including discounts to events, a members only gathering every month. We're doing a potluck this month, which is my favorite of all of the members only we do, and discounts to local shops, and obviously many other perks that you can see on the website. But my encouragement is, if you can make it to an event before and see if the people are your vibe, you can always do that. You can always DM me and I can let you know which event, and see if you connect with the people, because maybe we are what you're looking for, but maybe we're not. So that's the approach of girlfriends, and you can obviously hear it from other people's experience, which you are a member, which I'm very proud of, that you're doing amazing things and creating also something amazing. And you can hear from other people who are part of the community, and they're like, why it worked for them, or why it doesn't work for them.
Great. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for all the listeners and viewers that are listening and watching this, and thank you.